another one. Looks like I'm live. I hope the audio and the video is working fine. If it's not, let me know in the comment section. So I can see quite a few people. So just like the last time, I'm really open to your own ideas, and I really want to encourage you to share your ideas in the comment box, because once we get these different perspectives on the shadow work, on what is the shadow, then we can get a more complete picture of what we can do, right, in order to integrate our shadow, to learn more about ourselves and increase our self-awareness. So I've seen some questions here about what is the shadow work, what is shadow self. So I've done some videos in the past on this subject, but just to briefly state, I don't want to repeat myself too much. So the shadow is simply everything that we are not aware of ourselves. It's our unconscious memories, unconscious behavior patterns, how we relate to other people, and most importantly, different drives, different emotional reactions that we might be having, different impulses that we push away from our conscious mind for various reasons, which I'm going to go into in a minute, so that we don't have to look at them, right? So to understand the shadow, in my opinion, we first need to understand what the persona is, because as you will see here, there's a huge relationship between the shadow and the persona, something that I haven't been talking much in my previous videos. So the persona, according to Jungian psychology, by the way, I'm talking about the Jungian perspective to psyche, persona is basically who we think we are, in a sense that we receive this feedback from the environment, we receive different comments from other people, emotional reactions, and kind of feedback, how we are seen by other people, in a way, outcome of our actions, and we internalize it. We believe that, all right, this is what I am. And on the top of this, we have all the social rules and social norms that we internalize as well. So that, for example, in certain cultures, certain behaviors are inappropriate, right? So we know that we shouldn't be doing certain things because we might be rude, or we might hurt other people, or it's simply inappropriate, right? Whatever that means. So I'm just checking because I'm getting some error messages here. Can you let me know in a comment box whether you can see me well and hear me well, because I'm just getting some error messages. Anyway, so the persona itself, as I was saying, is this internalized messages we are receiving from the environment, which contribute to our self-concept. So then we develop this idea, okay, I'm such and such person, I like this and that, this is wrong, this is right, I need to do this in order to receive positive feedback from other people, so-called reward, or I need to avoid doing certain things so that I will be perceived in a certain way, and I will avoid this punishments or simply social rejections. And social rejection for human beings is extremely painful. We don't like to be rejected, because in the past it was equal with possibly death when we got rejected by a tribe. So if you take this whole concept of the persona and all these beliefs you are having about yourself, this persona is going to start casting the shadow. Now, very often people actually say that it is the ego that internalizes all these messages, but actually ego here is the mediator between the persona and our unconscious and the superego, depending on the perspective you want to use. So basically all this persona, all this self-concept that you develop, that you identify with, who you think you are, is going to be casting a shadow onto your unconscious. So what happens is, as the shadow, as your shadow contains all this disowned part of you, you're going to be kind of punishing towards other people who exhibit these characteristics, because it's in contrast to what you believe is right. So I can finally see while Jung was saying that whatever irritates us about other people is actually what irritates us about ourselves. So when we see certain behaviors in other people and we get irritated with them, it's not because these people irritate us or they do something to irritate us on purpose. Or maybe sometimes there are some sort of people that want to do it on purpose, but in a general sense, when we do get irritated with other people, it's because we don't accept certain parts of ourselves, certain parts of our behavior, and that is our shadow. So this is kind of complex in a sense that the shadow itself, it could be personified in a way, because the shadow itself could drive us to do certain things unconsciously. So the more we identify with the persona, the stronger our shadow will be, and the more it will start coming out in different situations, especially in the situations where we don't want it to come out. So for example, if we are worrying about being clumsy and we think like, no, I might be thinking like, okay, I'm not clumsy, and I'll get irritated with other people for being clumsy, like, what are you doing, like, pay attention. I will most likely get clumsy in these situations where I shouldn't get clumsy, like when public speaking, for example, or when being in social groups. So in situations which will bring me the most possible shame or anxiety for being clumsy. And it's not like everyone perceives being clumsy as something wrong. It's because I internalize this value that being clumsy is wrong. So again, being clumsy is pushed to the shadow, which will come out in different situations and probably put me in a very uncomfortable circumstances. So I'm just going to quickly read some comments because I can see some comments and questions maybe coming up. If the tribe is rubbish and rejects you, why worry about it? Yeah, that is a good question actually. I will try to answer it briefly. I don't want to deviate too much from the subject of the shadow, but the thing is that we are exactly the same humans as we were 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago. Like we haven't really that much changed. There's not that much change in we reason in the same way. We have the same innate drives, right? We need to eat, we need to drink, we need to sleep, we need to go to the bathroom, right? So we have all this, precisely the same common drives as we used to have since, the beginning of time. Of course, many different things changed. Probably we evolved, our intelligence became more sophisticated, probably through the development of language and various cultural tools. But we still have this innate drives to, for example, belong to the society, right? So whether you want to obey this drive or not, it's probably up to you, right? But the moment you become aware of it, it doesn't have as much power over you. The problem is when people are not aware of it. So you can see something called a tribal mentality, right? So connecting with other people at all costs, in a way, or avoiding rejections at all costs. And this is actually an example of over-identifying with the persona. So not paying attention to what is happening, what is directing our behavior, right? So it's casting the shadow and we unconsciously feeling drawn and dependent on other people in a way for not rejecting us. It sometimes, Sherwood says, it sometimes shows up if we feel sabotaged around our goals. Yeah, exactly. So we might be feeling like we are being pulled in different directions. So again, on the one side we want to go with the persona, on the other side we feel something coming with the shadow. So we do one thing and then we start doing something else. And I think that was it Freud, if I remember right, I think he said that in the neurotic state, which is the ancient kind of word for being in conflict, being in this conscious conflict between the shadow and the persona, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. So as long as the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, everything is fine. But the moment we start messing around with this dynamic, that's where we start to experience problems, but that's where also we start growing, which I'm gonna get to in a minute. So trying to integrate the shadow is equivalent to trying to get rid of my ego, for instance, through meditation, Max said. I will get to the shadow integration in a minute, but it's not about getting rid of the ego. And if anything, you really need your ego for that work, for integrating your shadow. So where was I? I got a bit distracted. Persona, shadow. All right. So the shadow that pushed in things from the conscious. Right. So other ways in which the shadow manifests itself, as I said, are drives, kind of unconscious drives, impulses, relational patterns, how we behave in certain situations. So all this pushed behaviors that are in our unconscious. Now, I think the easiest way actually to spot our shadow is in the relational context. So how we relate to other people. Another option would be to, as Jordan Peterson said, to follow your resentment, which also will lead you to your shadow. But if you follow just the resentment, you're gonna just discover some of the impulses and drives that you are having, but you're not gonna fully understand the shadow itself and how it plays out in your life. So in this situation, I agree with Peterson. Yes, follow your resentment. You're gonna learn about your shadow. You're gonna learn about this dark side. But the thing is with the shadow, it's not just the dark side. It's not just the awful impulses, awful drives, as we label them. But it also contains this protective elements, this creative elements, something that we are not consciously aware of, something that could push us outside of our comfort zone, right? It's not necessarily bad. So, as I was saying, we can, I think one of the easiest ways, maybe the easiest way for some people, is to observe ourselves in relationships. In psychoanalysis, there is a process called transference and counter-transference. In common terms, it's simply a projection. So we project elements of ourselves onto other people, especially the shadow. So what happens is that, again, this theme of what irritates us about other people is actually coming from other shadow, and it is within us. I think it's just the tip of the iceberg, because there are many other things that we can learn about ourselves from the relationship with other people. And it's not just negative sides, as I was saying, but also different patterns, different opportunities we might be having for growth and development through the relationship. So for example, in terms of projection, we might be seeing the negative sides, which will be irritating to us. Like, it's not uncommon to feel like other people are annoying, we don't like other people, there's something we get frustrated with about someone, especially in closer relationships. But there's also this potential for positive development, where we admire something in another person that we think that we don't have. So this is again the shadow, because it's coming from our unconscious. We don't admire things. We don't admire certain things in other people or characteristics for the sake of admiring them. But there's this unconscious element. Why do we admire certain things, right? Why do we get irritated with certain things? I think once we start investigating this causes for why we extend ourselves towards other people, that's how we can learn about our shadow. So the opposite process to that is that of something called counter-transference. So in this dynamic, we basically reply to someone projecting onto us, which is a big thing. Like, what can we do when we feel misunderstood or unseen by someone? What can we do when someone projects their stuff onto us? And two common reactions to that process, which again involve our shadow, is either engaging on this unconscious level, so we project straight away back onto them, right? Or we identify with this projection. So, for example, to use the same example as I said before about clumsiness. Let's say I believe I'm not clumsy, but someone... No, sorry, I got it wrong. Let's say I believe that I'm not clumsy and that I am clumsy, but someone projects on me their clumsiness. They get irritated with me for being clumsy, for not being clumsy, but it doesn't matter. They project onto me. So what happens is that I start engaging with this transference, as it's properly called, with this projection, and I start to push my shadow into the interaction. So then I start getting irritated, I start pointing out fingers, or you are doing this, you are doing that. It's quite messy relationship in that case because there's no conscious engagement. So that's one option for responding to that projection towards us. And the second one is identifying with the projection. So if someone projects on me their clumsiness, I start to identify with this unconscious thing, and suddenly I believe that I'm clumsy. So again, messy relationship, not true, only engages this unconscious drives. Thank you, Salasom. I don't know how to pronounce it. Thank you, Salasoma, I guess. Thank you so much. So, transference, counter-transference, projection, dealing with projection, all these relational patterns can give us some clues about our shadow. But in order to do that, we really need to be able to look at what's going on. So it kind of relates to this concept of meta-awareness I was talking in previous videos, which is kind of stepping outside of the current situation you are in and looking at what is going on, what is really going on. So looking at your feelings, where are your feelings coming from? Why are you feeling in this particular way and not the other, right? Why are you reacting so much to the other person? What are you trying to accomplish? What is your desire? What is your goal in this situation that you are in? So developing meta-awareness is quite straightforward once you are committed to this process, because then it's simply about learning to step outside of your emotional reaction. As I said before, with the shadow itself, shadow will provoke the strong emotions, strong feelings, and it's very easy to get lost in them. So you've probably seen this, classic arguments. Most likely you've been in one of them yourself. I've been certainly in many of them, and it's very common to human experience. In fact, if not the projection, we wouldn't be able to learn about ourselves, by the way. So we are projecting. But in these classic arguments, one person starts to get angry, the other person then gets angry, and then, anger keeps fueling each other until, everyone's completely lost. And all that you can observe in such situation is, the battle of two shadows and the unconscious projections. So there's no real people involved in that situation. But once you have that meta-awareness, you can step out from your emotional reaction, look at your emotional reaction. Okay, I'm feeling like this. Where is my feeling coming from? Where is my emotion coming from? Why am I reacting that way? What am I trying to accomplish? And just basically follow this questions to learn about yourself and to see the bigger picture. But you need to be willing to let go of what's happening to you. Let go of your pride, probably, or in a way, in a metaphorical sense, let go of your ego, so that you can see the whole situation from outside of it, basically. Let me look at some comments here. It's a short break. Oh yeah, to return to that question, so trying to integrate the shadow is equivalent to trying to get rid of my ego, for instance, through meditation. Right, so you could see it that way, but it's not like letting go. It's not like getting rid of your ego, but actually using your ego to remove, so in a way detach yourself from the content of your psyche, of your mind, of your feelings. So actually you need your ego for that, because if you lose your ego, that's when you get unconscious, that's when everything is chaos. It's one of the most misunderstood ideas that we borrowed from the East. Oh, you have to kill your ego. It's ridiculous. You need your ego to progress, to make decisions, to look with a sober eye onto yourself and other people. If you get rid of your ego, it's gonna be all mushy network of maybe connected ideas, but there won't be any governing force in that. There won't be any order. So ego, in a sense, is this ordering force. What is the problem with the ego is that we get attached to certain ideas, to certain states, so that we can feel secure, we can feel safe. The moment ego starts considering in a way that maybe it's wrong, maybe there's something more to the experience, it threatens the kind of existential anxiety, because then you have to face fear, then you have to face anxiety, then you have to face shame, and all these unpleasant, challenging emotions often associated with the fear of death. So in terms of the shadow work, what you need instead is the very strong ego, but very flexible. So you need to be able to detach yourself from the current situation, from your emotions, from your beliefs, from your mental state, and look at them from this rational, logical perspective. That would be my perspective, at least. Thank you, good vibes to all. Thank you so much. How do you know when you project into others or just observe others? So projection entails that other people or someone has to be the way you want them to be. So you have expectations towards them, you have a metric system in which you can judge them. All right, that person is doing something right, or that person is doing something wrong. So basically, in a way, trying to control other person, right? The moment you do that, the moment you have these expectations, the moment you are actually attached to these ideas and expectations, that's where the projection will happen. But at the same time, I believe it also involves your persona, because if not your persona, you wouldn't be so attached to this social collective norms and values, which actually very often drive our projections, because we internalize the behavior of other people, the values and beliefs of other people, and we use them as our own very often. You can see that in group dynamics, especially. In group dynamics, the moment you do something that challenges the group, you're doomed, probably. So again, this is this tribal mentality I was talking about. So in group, by the way, in group dynamics also uses the process of projection and identification with persona. So as a group, you could look at the whole group as having a collective persona, collective ego, and collective shadow. So something interesting too. I start cleaning the house when that happens. That's a good idea. Stratification. Max asks again, then what do the Easterns mean by losing the ego? Or did they get that wrong? So here's the thing, that in my opinion, there are levels of existence, in a way, levels of development. I'm completely running away of the subject now, sorry. I'll be back after this question. Basically, what throughout your life you develop your ego. You go through different stages of development, right? So there are something called pre-conventional stages and conventional, post-conventional. But what happens is that your ego undergoes through this development, through various stages, from a very little narcissistic bundle of, you know, self-centered drives and perceptions, to this more open-minded, autonomous being, independent of, you know, projections, probably shadow, other people's projections, and so on. So once you get to that stage, you know, you're this self-actualized being that can make decisions, that can negotiate with the unconscious. That will be the individuation path, accordingly to Jung. But then you also have other possibilities. In terms of spiritual development, there are further stages to that. So losing the ego in that case would be something, in the Western terms, in my opinion, would be something called self-transcendence. So basically you let go everything you know about yourself. But in terms of psychoanalysis, you're still not losing your ego, because in order to lose your ego, you need to use your ego to lose it. So how it doesn't make sense. But at the same time, ego could be conceptualized in from many different perspectives. And also another thing to consider is that Easterners use different languages. So their conceptualization of the psyche, of different forces in nature, will be slightly different to the Western way, because their language uses different logic. It's completely different language to our own. So they understand the mind and the world around them in a slightly different way. From the Western perspective, no, if you lose your ego, you're going to go mad. You're going to get psychotic. That's what actually happens in psychosis. People lose their ego. They lose it. There's no negotiating. There's no driving, organizing force in the psyche anymore. Alright, probably should continue. I'll read some more questions and comments a bit later. Just I don't want it to become too chaotic. That's okay. Alright, so the last bit I wanted to talk about is about integrating your shadow. So integrating your shadow could be kind of misunderstood in the sense that we become our shadow, or we become everything, all these impulses and behaviors and drives that our shadow contains. So from this perspective, if that would happen, we could call this state of being, state of mind, as shadow possession. So basically, when we become our shadow, we're going to lose the ego function. We're going to lose this rational, this self-governing, autonomous principle in our psyche, and we gonna be at the mercy of all these shadow impulses, all these drives, all these kind of primitive and unacceptable parts of our mind that drive our behavior, regardless if we want them or not. And it's a never-ending process. The shadow work is a never-ending process of constantly paying attention to what you are doing and reflecting on your experience. So you get new experiences, you reflect on them, you see, are there any patterns? Can you compare these present experiences with your past experiences and see if are you engaged in some repetition or some compulsive behavior in it either. When you repeat your thoughts, when you repeat your behaviors, when you repeat the types of relationships you're engaged in over and over again. Usually in such situations, when you spot these patterns, when there is repetition, you're probably somewhat hooked onto your unconscious, and this unconscious directs your behavior, directs your life in a sense, because if you repeat these behaviors, most likely unconsciously, then you don't really have that much autonomy to choose. You don't have that much independence. So you're at the mercy of the unconscious. So to integrate our shadow, in my opinion, is actually constantly becoming aware of what we are not conscious of. So even if, let's say, you take a snapshot of yourself right now, alright, this is my ego, this is my persona, this is my shadow, and you become completely aware of who you are, of the totality of your shadow, tomorrow you're going to start producing a new shadow again. So it's like, it's a never-ending work, because you constantly acquire new learnings, acquire new experiences, and and at the same time your psyche is infinite. You encounter people, you encounter various people, you encounter new circumstances, new experiences in the external world, and you internalize them as well. You kind of learn and you borrow things from the environment to kind of define yourself, to compose this whole self-construct. So with shadow integration, once you become aware of all these impulses, all these drives that you don't like about yourself, that provoke this shame, that make you feel insecure or anxious, you can see them as potentialities, as options for who you could be, right? Of options, how could you behave in certain situations if you gave permission to yourself to do so. So for example, if you let's say part of your shadow is most likely selfish and self-centered. Everyone has that. I got it as well, definitely. Everyone has this kind of narcissistic, self-centered side. Once you become aware of it and accept it, alright, this is a part of me. I can't be selfish, I can't be narcissistic. It doesn't mean at the same time that this is all that I am and that it completely defines me, right? It's just a part of me. But you can see it as a potential. Could you use this selfishness in certain situations? Could you use this narcissism? What about the concept of self-care, right? Is it not selfish to take care of yourself at least once in a while? So you can see here that shadow has a function, like all these elements of the shadow, all these little things that you don't want to be, that irritate you, actually have a function that you could use to broaden your personality, to broaden your ability to adapt, to learn from different circumstances. And also, most importantly, once you're doing that, you become more and more autonomous, an independent individual. So again, it is this process of individuation, as Jung described, where we detach ourselves from everything. So I would imagine the end result is that the fully individuated person is gonna struggle to define themselves. Like there will be, yeah, I can be anything. I have these different potentials, but it's not like I'm having a limited personality. It's not like I'm right, wrong, I'm a good person, I'm a bad person. But individuated person is having this shadow integrated among many other things, whatever we can dig in the psyche, and uses all this as a potential to expand the self-concept, the self-awareness of themselves. So the end result is like, alright, I'm everything. I'm actually everything. I have strengths, I have weaknesses, but I can be anything I want. I have all this potential, right? It doesn't mean that I'm gonna go and do it, because you need to evaluate how much time and effort the things are gonna take. But you have the potential for everything, for creation, for destruction, for being right, for being, kind towards others and caring. But you also have this potential for destroying relationships, destroying other people, and being harmful to others, right? So, whatever awful things you can think about humanity, you most likely have it as well. And it's difficult to accept for people. That's why I push it. That's why we push it to the shadow. So, in short, again, integration of the shadow is constantly expanding self-awareness. And in this situation, mindfulness, meditation, developing meta-awareness, meta-cognition in that case, so thinking about how you think, how you process things, why you behave in a certain way, and stepping outside is helpful. And most importantly, creating this detachment between your awareness, so in a way your ego, and the content of your mind. So you feel angry, alright, look at your anger from a distance and see where it's coming from. You feel sad, again, look at it from a distance, see what is the sadness telling you about yourself, about other people, about your relationships, right? So again, creating this detachment between yourself, your feelings, your beliefs, right? Convictions, judgments about other people, will allow you to look at what is happening in your mind, right? From this more distant perspective. It's not like third person perspective, because you are using your awareness. You are your awareness. You are your ego, right? And once you actually take a step back, you will realize that you are not all this. Alright, should be working now. Alright, I think I'm back online. Let me know if it's working. Okay, working again. Sorry about that, guys. So I ended up on like how we, once we become aware of that unconscious and of that shadow, we integrate it by, you know, using its potential, looking at it as a potential, or as a kind of function that it can perform for us. So just I got a little bit distracted. Sorry about that, guys. So I'm going to read a few questions. Having become aware of the shadow, how do you go about accepting? Yeah, that's a difficult one. So actually that's a good point, because accepting the shadow is a part of integration. So if you can't accept the fact that you have something really bad about yourself, something really wrong about yourself, or if you can't accept the fact that you might have some shameful impulses, for example, shameful as judged by probably by other people, then you will not integrate the shadow, right? So actually that's a really good point. So you need to accept the fact that, all right, this is your shadow, these are the elements of your psyche that are within your unconscious, are manifesting as this maybe desires or impulses that you are having, right? They are there. You accept this fact, but at the same time you need to remain detached from this content, from parts of this shadow itself, because the moment you attach yourself, you're going to start getting swallowed into the unconscious. And we know what happens when people get something called shadow projection, right? When they completely get swallowed in the unconscious, in the shadow itself. And these are probably the criminals, Nazis, fascists, and people like that. So all these people who did terrible things for the humanity. It's shadow kind of, what's it called? Shadow possession, sorry. So basically being possessed by your shadow, getting swallowed by the unconscious, and losing the agency, losing the rational function of analyzing our behavior and questioning what we are doing and why. Is it like yin yang, or like two wolves? Both sides in us, bearer of words, asked. Yeah, it could be comparable to this. So, you know, as a whole individual, it's not all the right things that you are having, all the colorful things that you are having about yourself, all these nice things that you believe to see within yourself because it's acceptable on the social level. But this is also all the things that the society might not approve of, right? All the things that other people might not approve of. So the shadow, you know, the deeper you go into the shadow, the more into this darkness you are going. So the deeper you go, the more likely, the bigger chances for us to actually meet, you know, the devil himself in a metaphorical sense, because all humans have this awful drives within them, and awful, I judge them as awful again from this persona or the ego perspective. I pass the judgment, but we need some value system, right? We need some beliefs. We need to understand the right from wrong, and at the same time we need to be able to adapt and let go of these ideas if the circumstances we are in require that from us, right? So for example, I might believe that fighting is wrong, right? Hurting other people is wrong. But if I'm presented with a situation where my life is threatened, these beliefs will go through the window because I need to defend myself. And obviously I want to live and I want to stay healthy. So again, it's social context. Context you are in plays a huge role in how you will manifest the shadow or your persona. But again, if you're not fully aware of your shadow, you will not have this agency to choose these drives, to choose these impulses, but you will be led by them. There will, one day you will express a little bit of shadow, other day not, right? And some psychoanalysts actually conceptualize that things like accidents happen because of the shadow, because we are not paying attention. So there is a reason for having an accident when you hurt yourself in the first place, because you are not paying attention to some force within you, some energy, some impulse or drives that you might be having. Ryzek, hope I pronounce it right, asks, how can one overcome ideas that are attached to the ego, basically being part of the identity from oneself? I don't think it's about overcoming the ideas. It's more about putting a distance between yourself and the idea. It's just the idea, it doesn't define you. It's just a thought. It's just maybe the belief that you are having. But what you can do is you can create this distance and look at this idea and question it. Where is it coming from? How does it serve you? And what the purpose of that idea is in your mind in the first place. So in terms of overcoming ideas, I can see things like thought replacement and cognitive behavioral therapy. So things like positive thinking maybe, so creating a positive dialogue, but that would be having a different function to integrating your shadow and working with your shadow. When you're engaged in shadow work, actually you want the opposite. You want to welcome all the ideas you are getting so that you can understand yourself, so you can see potential patterns by paying attention in the present moment, again, ideally to the present moment, to what's happening. And you want to welcome all these ideas. You don't want to overcome them, because once you start overcoming them, you're going to start pushing the shadow back to the unconscious. There must have been a reason for rejecting the shadow aspects in the first place, and so how do we find this condition that led to the initial rejection? Well, the initial rejection is probably the socialization. So if we all didn't develop the ego and the persona, and if we didn't go through this process of socialization and kind of, in a way, conditioning or discipline or training ourselves, I'm not sure what the alternative is, because then I'm not sure if you would be able to be socialized in the first place. But at the same time, I can see that how this process could lead to the creation of the shadow itself. So maybe it's not so much about the socialization as a process, as a problem in itself, but maybe it has to do with what is being rejected and how. So yeah, I think that the rejection is the socialization process. I can't find any other cause for the potential, I can't see any other potential cause for the rejection of the shadow other than to get socialized, to function in the society, to get along with other people. So you don't express wildly all these drives, right? And only once your ego is fully developed, then you have the strength to face this very difficult, very destructive drives that the shadow can contain. Again, it's not all that the shadow consists of, but yeah, it's a big part of the shadow. All this destructive part of ourselves. And one more question from the same person. Joanna, are you familiar with Kant's categorical imperative? Nope, I am not familiar. Robin Gather asks, so is every evil person, like a Nazi, under the spell of a shadow projection? But a communist will view a capitalist as evil, whilst both think they are good. Where's the shadow here? Exactly. So shadow, it's not like, so the shadow as a collective archetype is basically anything that a person might be unaware of. So it represents our unconscious, which might represent all these drives, all these unconscious ideas, desires, anything unacceptable or anything destructive, anything very impulsive, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of seen from the collective level. But from the personal perspective, or from the particular community perspective, from a particular group perspective, the shadow will be defined by what they are pushing into the unconscious, right? So, as you brought into this example, a communist would view a capitalist as a shadow because they are pushing something about capitalists into the unconscious, into their own unconscious, as a social group, on this collective level. So their shadow will be the capitalist agenda, beliefs, ways of living, ways of politics and whatnot. So you see here the shadow also contains this personal element. How do you know when there is integration, even if there is a small percentage? When, in my opinion, I think it's when you start feeling like you're having more and more agency and more kind of choice in your everyday life. So you stop being as reactive emotionally. You can look at your emotions, you can look at how you're reacting to certain ways, right? So you're not being completely swallowed by your impulses. You can stop, you can pause, you can reflect, right? I think that is the crucial part of the social integration, as I have been emphasizing, this increased sense of agency and independence. So you can start making choices in your life that are independent of what you think is right in terms of the society. So it's kind of independent, being kind of independent of your persona as well, where you might be aware that whatever you're trying to do in your life might be unconventional, might be seen as being weird from the perspective of other people, but you choose to do it anyway. So again, this increase of sense of agency and independence, I think it would be the first sign of integration. And then once you enhance your self-awareness, once you learn more about yourself, and once you learn more about these drives and impulses, you're going to start having more and more agency in terms of choice, how you can react, how you can deal with every situation that you are presented in, not through the prism of emotional reactions that you are having, although these are very valuable for their own reason, because they tell you something about yourself and the other person and the situation itself. But when you have agency, you don't have to go with the emotional expression or the emotional reaction, right? You have a choice. Okay, so I'm feeling this. How do I respond to this situation? I can listen to the guidance of my feelings. I can listen to the guidance in a way of my shadow, who wants to tear apart the other person because they disagree with me. But I have a choice. I can do something else, right? So you can be aware of an impulse, destructive impulse, for example, or it could be a creative impulse to do something weird, to do something unconventional. But you don't have to go along with it. You can see it as an option, as a choice, as a potential for who you could be, how you could behave. I think that's as far as I could describe the shadow integration, because I'm still working on my shadow as well. So there are certain limits to what I can share with you, what I can know in the first place. It's not like I've integrated everything and I'm completely enlightened, because I'm still learning myself. But again, from my experience, is this increase of choice, agency, creating a distance, being able to make conscious choices in your life. And all these processes, they expand, they increase over time as you learn more about yourself. Thank you, Sherwood. I think that's a very good perspective. You experience some mindfulness, examining the moment, making a loving response. Exactly. So you can choose. It's more awareness, more presence, more mindfulness, and you choose accordingly to the values you choose, not accordingly to the persona that you've created throughout all your life, but accordingly to the values that you are choosing, right? The persona itself and the values that are coming through you, they are rarely chosen. They've been internalized by you through the rewards and punishment with the society, through the process of socialization. That would be my perspective, at least. So we're kind of running out of time, and for some reason, it's probably my shadow as well. I wanted to talk about the anima and animus, because I've never had a chance to actually make a video on this subject. So I thought I'm gonna touch on this in this video, since I'm having an opportunity to talk about this subject, as the anima and animus is related to the shadow quite a lot, in fact. So I'm just gonna touch on it briefly. So the anima and animus is the animus is the feminine principle in the male psyche, and the animus is the male principle, the male function in the female psyche. So what happens is, as you explore your shadow, eventually you will reach the anima and animus, or the animus. So it depends, depending if you're a man or a woman, you're gonna meet that part of the psyche that creates a relationship or forms a bridge between your conscious personality and the deeper unconscious stuff, in a way. So it's a kind of personified archetype. So it contains some of your personal experiences. So the way how you relate to your opposite gender, opposite sex people, and all these patterns of how you've been related, for example, to your father or to your mother, and then later at times to people of the opposite sex. All these relationships contribute to this development of the anima and animus. So once you are able to, in my opinion, once you are able to consciously and consistently work with your shadow, so you minimize the influence of the unconscious has on you, then eventually it is possible to encounter the anima and animus. But as we are running out of time already, I didn't have a chance to discuss it as much as I was planning to discuss. Perhaps it's not meant to be. guys, sorry, hey guys, sorry I left you, but yeah, we just had a little earthquake. That was yeah, quite an interesting timing. So yeah, so I'm just taking a minute here. Can't believe the timing. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just stressed, obviously, because I wasn't sure what the hell is going on. But anyway, I was gonna wrap it up anyway because it's been a whole hour and it's getting quite late here. But yeah, quite an interesting timing. Anyway, I've been having lots of problems on this live stream. Like first was the internet connection, now some tremors out of nowhere. So this is kind of interesting. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about these things anymore. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really sorry that this stream hasn't been the quality I was planning it to be, but obviously things happened that were beyond my control in a way. It's been kind of weird, but regardless, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for all your participation. Thank you for sharing the ideas, your questions. It's been very productive and thought-provoking session, and I hope to see you next time. I'm not sure when the next live stream will be because I'm taking some time off next week actually, so it might be in 2-3 weeks or so. Again, thank you very much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.